Okay, in this video we're going to talk about solving absolute value equations. So what we're going to start with is just absolute value. So if you see something like we have on the screen right now where it says absolute value of x equals 3, I want you to think about what that actually means. Now, when you see absolute value, you think, oh, that's the distance from 0 on a number line, or absolute value makes everything positive. But when you see this absolute value of x equals 3, we have to think what it actually means. And what that means is there's some number that we're going to call x that is 3 spaces away from 0 on the number line. So if I were to say to you guys, I'm thinking of a number that is 3 spaces away from 0 on the number line, there would be two different answers, right? We can think that -3 is 3 spots away from 0 on the number line, right? If 0 is here, we'd have -1, -2, -3, or we can go +1, +2, +3, and both of those numbers are going to be 3 spots away from 0 on the number line. So when we're thinking about absolute value equations and we see some absolute value is equal to some number, we want to think, all right, whatever is inside that absolute value has to be equal to the positive or the negative value that it's set equal to. So if we look at a problem that says 2 times the absolute value of x minus 1 minus 5 is equal to 1. So if we think about what we saw previously on the previous slide, it said the absolute value of x was equal to 3. So we knew whatever was inside that absolute value was equal to 3. We have a little bit more going on now. We have the 2 on the outside of the absolute value. We have the 5 in there as well. So what we want to think about doing is getting the absolute value by itself. So we're going to treat the absolute value, all of that, as if it were a variable. So we would want to get rid of everything that is not that absolute value. So we would want to add 5, and we would have 2 times the absolute value of x minus 1 is now equal to 6. We would divide by 2, and we would get x minus 1, absolute value, is equal to 3. So what this means, again, is there is some value that we're going to call x minus 1, and we know it is 3 spots away from 0 on the number line. So we know that this x minus 1 is either going to be 3, or this x minus 1 is going to be equal to, oops, sorry, forgot the minus 1. Or this x minus 1 is going to be equal to -3. So whatever we saw inside our absolute value, we have to set equal to the positive and the negative number that it was, our absolute value was set equal to. Because the absolute value just says I'm that far from 0. So I'm either going to be 3 from 0 on the positive side or 3 from 0 on the negative side. So looking at this, I'm assuming you guys can look at this and just say, all right, I know how to finish this. X is going to be equal to 4, and x is going to be equal to -2. And if we check our answers, we can take 4, put it up here into our absolute value, and we would say 2 times the absolute value of 4 minus 1 minus 5. So 4 minus 1 is 3. The absolute value of +3 is +3. 2 times 3 is 6. 6 minus 5 is 1. And we wanted to be equal to 1. If we check the other answer, the -2, we would say 2 times the absolute value of -2 minus 1 minus 5. -2 minus 1 is -3. The absolute value of -3 is +3. 2 times 3 is 6, minus 5 is 1, and again, that's what we wanted to solve. So when we're looking at an absolute value equation, we want to think, what does this actually mean? The first step we want to do is we want to get rid of all of the stuff that is not the absolute value. So on the problem that we're looking at now, we wanted to get rid of the -5, we wanted to get rid of the 2 times the absolute value, leaving us just with the absolute value. And then we can say whatever's inside has to be equal to either 3 or -3, because we're saying this whole x minus 1 is 3 spots away from 0. So let's look at one more problem. And there's something interesting that happens here. So let's change that problem we just saw. We had 2 times the absolute value of x minus 1. The one we just did, we said -5. So let's try this one and say +5 equals 1. So we're going to do the same idea. We have a +5 we want to get rid of. So let's start with that. Let's subtract our 5. So we're going to say 2 times the absolute value of x minus 1 is equal to -4. We still have that 2 we want to get rid of, so let's get rid of the 2, and then we get the absolute value of x minus 1 is equal to -2. So, following the logic that we had a second ago, we would say that x minus 1 is equal to -2, and x minus 1 is equal to +2. Solving these things out, add 1 to each side, x is going to be equal to -1, and x would be equal to 3. So it's really important to check your answers on problems like this. If we take this -1 and we put it up in here, we're going to have 2 times the absolute value of -1 minus 1 minus 5. -1 minus 1 is -2. So 2 times the absolute value of -2. Absolute value of -2 is +2. So we get 4 minus 5, which is equal to -1. But if we look, we wanted it to be equal to +1. So this does not work. If you follow the steps through, you'll find out that x equals 3 doesn't work either. So the trick here, the thing that's happening, is when we had this statement right here, absolute value of x minus 1 is equal to -2, that's saying that there's some value that we're going to say is called x minus 1 that is -2 away from 0. And that's impossible, because if we're thinking about away from 0, that's talking about a distance. We can't have negative distance. You can't travel -2 feet away from something. You travel 2 feet away from something. So anytime you have an absolute value set equal to a negative number, we're going to have no solution. Now, that's only when your absolute value is equal to a negative number. If there's something else out here, say a 3, you'd have to divide by that 3 first, and then evaluate if you can find out if there's an answer or not. So if we divided by 3, we would say the absolute value of x minus 1 is equal to -2/3, and we would still have an absolute value equal to a negative number. But if we had -3 out front and we divided, we would say that x minus 1, the absolute value, is equal to +3, and that would be acceptable. So that's going to wrap it up for this video. Go ahead and try your homework problems,